Good evening. Tonight we begin a journey not into stillness alone, but into the dynamic practice of awakening, following the young monk Kaito at the Temple of Eternal Serenity. Kaito believed true wisdom resided only in the dust-covered sutras and the silent halls of meditation, yet the world outside, dry and cracked by an unrelenting drought, was calling him to a realization far deeper than any ancient text could offer. This is a tale of how practical action becomes the most profound spiritual discipline, revealing that enlightenment is not a destination found by avoiding the world, but the very way we choose to walk through it, embracing every moment of struggle and selfless service, understanding that true peace is cultivated through engagement, not escape. Before we immerse ourselves completely in Kaito's challenge and the profound teachings of the Paramitas, please take a moment to root yourself in the present reality. Let me know in the comments below what country you are listening from and what time of day it is, anchoring this shared experience in geography and temporal reality, linking your personal moment of listening to the continuous flow of global consciousness. Your participation strengthens this community of seekers, reminding us that though our individual paths vary greatly, the universal quest for inner peace and wisdom unites us all. If this deep, narrative approach to spiritual learning resonates with your heart, please subscribe and gently press the notification bell to join us for future journeys into mindfulness and Zen philosophy, ensuring you do not miss the continuation of Kaito's challenging path, the unexpected task. Kaito sat rigid, his spine perfectly vertical against the cool stone wall of the study hall, attempting desperately to penetrate the dense, almost impenetrable wisdom of the Heart Sutra. He muttered the phrase, "Form is emptiness, emptiness is form," over and over in his mind, struggling to reconcile this profound intellectual truth with the gnawing impatience and dissatisfaction that relentlessly plagued his core, whispering that his efforts were insufficient. He had been at the temple for 5 years, dedicating long hours to zazen and textual analysis, yet the deep, unshakable peace he craved remained agonizingly elusive, always seeming to hide just behind the next difficult philosophical passage, or the subsequent mandatory hour of silence, fueling a subtle, self-congratulatory arrogance regarding the superiority of theoretical pursuits over mundane, physical temple duties. A faint, rhythmic sound began to intrude upon his carefully constructed concentration, the familiar soft shuffle of Master Hoshi's worn sandals on the highly polished wood floor approaching the library entrance with a slow, deliberate cadence. Kaito quickly closed the heavy text with a barely audible sigh, placing it precisely at the edge of his woven mat, hoping his intensely studious posture and serious expression would appropriately impress the master, whose movements were always quiet, but carried the powerful, palpable gravity of a distant thunderstorm ready to break the oppressive heat. The very air surrounding Kaito seemed to grow noticeably heavier with the master's palpable presence, smelling faintly of sharp pine incense and freshly turned, dusty earth, a contradiction that always utterly perplexed Kaito's overly refined, intellectualized senses. Master Hoshi entered the room, his ancient eyes crinkling deeply at the corners as he surveyed the young monk's intense and somewhat strained demeanor, noting the tension in Kaito's perfectly straightened neck. Kaito, seeking immediate validation, immediately recited a complex, nuanced passage from the Heart Sutra from memory, his voice clear and ringing loudly with academic pride, meticulously explaining the intricate philosophical relationship between the impermanent 5 skandhas and the ultimate absence of a permanent, enduring self. He finished the recitation with a flourish of technical terminology, expecting a substantial nod of approval for his unwavering dedication to abstract theory secretly believing this deep academic mastery was the true ultimate measure of spiritual advancement and detachment from the world's bothersome, messy trivialities. Hoshi simply waited patiently for the echo of Kaito's impressively complex pronouncements to completely fade into the silence of the library, then gently shook his head once, a gesture so slight it was barely perceptible. The master looked calmly past the confused young monk, directing his gaze through the large arched window facing the steep valley floor, where persistent dust devils spun relentlessly over fields that should have been vibrantly lush green with crops. He spoke softly, his deep voice like the slow, purposeful grinding of ancient, heavy stones. Your mind grasps only the fleeting shadow of the teaching, Kaito. But I fear your hands know absolutely nothing of the sun-baked, thirsty earth that requires the teaching to be fully realized. Kaito, reluctantly, followed Hoshi's steady gaze, and for the first time in what felt like many weeks, he truly allowed himself to see the devastating severity of the drought below their high sanctuary. The once mighty river, usually a glorious silver ribbon winding powerfully through the entire landscape, was now reduced to a slow, pathetic, muddy trickle, barely managing to sustain the few remaining patches of withered scrub brush and hardy weeds clinging to the banks. The village roofs looked dangerously brittle and fragile under the unforgiving high summer sun, and a faint, thin haze of conserved wood smoke suggested desperate, resource-limited cooking. The isolated beauty of the temple's lofty perch suddenly felt profoundly less like a spiritual refuge and much more like a restrictive cage of unconscious privilege, separating them sharply from the genuine, immediate human suffering unfolding just down the mountain path. "You will descend immediately," Hoshi commanded, his tone shifting abruptly from gentle philosophical reflection to firm, unwavering practical instruction. "Take the 2 largest water barrels we can safely spare, and be sure to carry the medicinal herbs we diligently prepared last winter, specifically for the severe fevers that inevitably follow long periods of deep thirst and malnutrition. Do not return to the temple until you have done far more than merely deliver the necessary goods. You must stay, observe, and genuinely understand the true quality of their pervasive suffering, and seek out the true source of their need, which is far beyond the simple, obvious thirst for water alone." Kaito's carefully constructed mental calm shattered instantaneously into 1,000 sharp fragments of internal protest and frustrated complaint. "Why," he thought bitterly, "must I constantly interrupt my critical study and meditation for mere tedious logistics and exhausting heavy lifting? The village's immediate pressing problems, while certainly regrettable on an intellectual level, seemed hopelessly entangled in the messy, complicated world of attachment, societal politics, and endless material want, precisely the realm he was training so diligently and hard to transcend, believing that his supreme mission lay solely in achieving higher states of consciousness for the abstract benefit of all beings." Hoshi, sensing the young monk's powerful underlying resistance and intellectualized spiritual pride, turned back fully to face him, his entire presence radiating an undeniable, gentle warmth that melted some of the monk's internal ice. The master gently touched the very sutra Kaito had been so intently reading moments before. "This written knowledge is intrinsically perfect, Kaito," he acknowledged, "but it regrettably remains utterly inert until it flows actively into the necessary stream of genuine, compassionate action. You mistakenly search for the paramita of wisdom, prajna, only in dusty scrolls and abstract thought, but true prajna only fully awakens when it is robustly tempered by dana, sila, and kshanti, generosity, ethics, and patience, all of which must be actively practiced on the hot, unforgiving ground. Hoshi then delivered the essential core lesson, echoing a powerful and often misunderstood teaching. Just as a candle cannot burn without fire, men cannot ultimately exist without a spiritual life, and that is an absolute truth known to all monks. But Kato, remember this maxim deeply. The ultimate truth, the truth that encompasses all others, is that everything is profoundly interconnected. To truly heal the drought-stricken valley is to simultaneously heal the temple's separation, and to heal the temple's flawed perception is to heal the deepest parts of yourself. Your intellectual separation of the purely spiritual and the deeply physical is the fundamental illusion that keeps you perpetually bound to the intellectual cage of theory. Kaito swallowed his silent, lingering protest, the master's firm, clear words ringing with undeniable, profound authority that transcended the simple theoretical knowledge he had been seeking. He rose slowly and deliberately, retrieving the heavy, leather-strapped water barrels and the canvas sack of herbs from the storage room, the crushing weight of the physical task immediately settling heavily into his tired shoulders and lower back. As he strapped the cumbersome load securely to himself, the intense aromatic smell of the medicinal herbs mingled strangely with the fine dust he carried on his robes, signaling his immediate, forced departure from the purely abstract theoretical world of his beloved studies and the inevitable entry into the harsh, demanding reality of the suffering world below, a descent that promised to be both intensely physical and profoundly spiritual. The empty pot. Kaito's descent was long and grueling, the heavy wooden barrels chafing against the ropes strapped tightly across his shoulders, the intense, unrelenting heat of the midday sun baking the fine, ubiquitous dust that billowed up with every agonizing step he took down the treacherous, winding mountain path. He realized quickly that the intellectual pursuit of enlightenment had poorly prepared his soft body for the brutal demands of this physical labor, finding that his breathing was shallow and uneven, not the deep, calming breaths he managed effortlessly during seated meditation. His mind, usually a sanctuary of ordered thought and complex philosophy, was instead consumed by petty complaints and resentment towards the master for this seemingly arbitrary, tiresome assignment, viewing the task not as a noble opportunity for service, but rather as a humiliating and unnecessary distraction from his true spiritual work, a monumental waste of his valuable intellectual time. When he finally reached the edge of the parched, desolate village of Sotoko, the oppressive atmosphere hit him like a physical blow. A dense, heavy blanket woven from the collective despair and pervasive smell of stagnant air and unwashed bodies. The houses, usually vibrant and bustling centers of activity, stood silent and dejected, their earthen walls cracked and peeling severely under the relentless heat, resembling forgotten monuments to a prosperity that had abruptly vanished. He saw children sitting motionless in the meager shade, their eyes wide and unsettlingly vacant, their usually playful energy completely drained by the gnawing hunger and intense thirst that plagued the entire community, confirming the severity of the crisis Hoshi had warned him about in the temple's cool, detached library. Kaito set the cumbersome barrels down with a resounding thud that momentarily startled several villagers, drawing immediate attention to his presence and the precious cargo he carried. An elderly woman, her face a roadmap of deep wrinkles etched by decades of labor and worry, slowly approached him, holding out a battered clay pot that was tragically bone dry and hopelessly useless. Her unspoken plea was raw and utterly desperate. A tangible, suffocating weight that was far more eloquent and demanding than any spoken word could ever have been, challenging Kaito's carefully maintained abstract sense of compassion with the overwhelming force of immediate personal human necessity and profound suffering. Feeling profoundly inadequate and utterly overwhelmed by the magnitude of their collective suffering, Kaito fumbled awkwardly for a comforting response, instinctively retreating to the familiar safe ground of his academic studies and the philosophical pronouncements he had memorized so diligently. He began earnestly to speak about the inherent illusory nature of suffering and the ultimate futility of clinging to transient material forms, reciting verbatim a beautiful, lengthy passage from the Lotus Sutra on the ultimate permanence of the Dharma body. His voice, trained to echo powerfully through the temple's serene halls, sounded sharp, irritatingly condescending, and profoundly hollow in the scorching, dusty air of the distressed village, completely failing to resonate with the villagers' immediate, agonizing physical pain and fear. The old woman merely looked at the young monk with eyes that held centuries of weathered understanding and an expression of deep, almost pitying disappointment. She slowly lowered the empty clay pot, the gesture itself a potent rejection of his well-intentioned but utterly useless theoretical advice. She interrupted his eloquent discourse with a single, clear, painfully direct question. "Monk, do your enlightened words, however beautiful they may be, truly fill this empty pot and save my dying grandson from the grip of the fever that consumes him entirely?" Her challenge pierced through Kaito's intellectual armor, forcing him to confront the sharp, painful disconnect between his profound theoretical knowledge and the complete, crushing absence of practical, compassionate action. Stung deeply by the old woman's undeniable truth and the devastating failure of his abstract philosophy, Kaito abruptly fell silent, the recited words dying uselessly on his suddenly dry lips. He bent quickly and began the difficult, cumbersome process of carefully dividing the scarce water, meticulously measuring out small, inadequate rations into the villagers' waiting, empty containers, knowing instinctively that even this limited amount would barely last the community until the following morning. He felt the intense, heavy pressure of their hungry, desperate eyes boring into his every movement, realizing with a sudden, painful clarity that true spiritual realization was not merely an intellectual understanding achieved in isolation, but a heavy, challenging responsibility that demanded immediate, selfless engagement with the suffering world. Just as he was finishing the tedious, difficult distribution, a young boy, completely covered in dust and sweat from a strenuous run, stumbled breathlessly into the square, clutching a small, tightly sealed bamboo cylinder. He immediately handed the cylinder to Kaito, explaining that he had been sent urgently by Master Hoshi himself, who had anticipated the young monk's immediate need for a practical correction. Kaito, curious and slightly defensive about the master's seemingly unnecessary intrusion, broke the wax seal carefully and unfurled the thick, dried parchment scroll contained inside, recognizing instantly the master's familiar, elegant brushstrokes forming the guiding lesson of the day. The master's message was brief, poignant, and brutally direct, cutting straight to the core of Kaito's intellectual pride and spiritual misdirection. The note stated clearly, "The paramita of generosity, known as dana, is not merely the simple act of giving material things, Kaito, but the complete and utter relinquishing of the giver's self-importance and the total absence of any expectation of a return. You try to generously offer the abstract knowledge you possess, which costs you nothing, but you stubbornly hold tightly onto the very actions that might actually cost you your precious comfort, your time, and your self-serving attachment to higher learning." The parchment then bore a powerful, essential citation that resonated deeply within Kaito's confused mind, a teaching attributed to the great Gautama Buddha himself. Do not dwell in the paralyzing past. Do not nervously dream of the overwhelming future, but instead concentrate all your mind, your entire being, fully on the pressing present moment. Kaito understood immediately that the master was instructing him to abandon his intellectual attachment to future spiritual rewards and his lingering resentment of past academic interruptions, compelling him to focus solely and completely on the single, necessary, and painful reality, the current, overwhelming thirst and the desperate, immediate need for water in the harsh now. He looked down again at the heavy, dry barrel he had just painstakingly emptied, then across at the old woman, who was gently comforting her feverish grandchild with the few meager drops of water she had received. Kaito felt a powerful wave of genuine humility wash over him, a realization that true dana required more than just the external material gift. It demanded the profound internal surrender of his ego's desire to be the wise, detached dispenser of abstract knowledge. He silently gathered his empty barrels, understanding now that he needed to descend even deeper into the experience of the village, learning how to give not from his intellectual surplus, but from the painful, immediate reality of his personal, physical lack and fear, the gift of little. The immediate distribution was finished, but the deep, gnawing sense of crisis and underlying scarcity still hung heavy and thick in the stifling air of Sotoko. Kaito found a tiny, uncomfortable patch of shade beneath a wilting fig tree, where he tried diligently to meditate, attempting to process the intense mental shock of the morning's painful confrontation, but the persistent cries of hungry children and the low, continuous moan of the parched wind constantly pierced the delicate membrane of his concentration. He meticulously checked the small canteen he kept specifically for his own arduous journey back up the mountain, realizing with a sudden sharp pang of fear that he had barely enough water left to sustain himself for the strenuous ascent, and this terrifying scarcity quickly fueled a fierce, protective instinct that he recognized instantly as selfish clinging. The lesson of generosity, dana, which he had so easily glossed over in his study of the texts, suddenly took on a visceral, sharp edge of immediate personal challenge. He had given the village their supply from the temple's substantial reserves, an act that was noble but ultimately cost him nothing personally, as the temple always had more. But his small personal canteen represented his absolute limit, his security blanket against the brutal physical exhaustion of the mountain climb and the intense heat. He argued internally that giving this last small supply would be foolish, reckless even, compromising his own critical ability to return and retrieve the next, larger delivery for the village. Suddenly, a young man, perhaps no older than Kaito himself, approached him with hesitant, downcast eyes. The man explained in a low, exhausted whisper that his elderly, bedridden father had completely missed the earlier general distribution, having been too weak to leave his small dwelling, and now his breathing was becoming shallow and dangerously erratic. The young man did not explicitly ask for water. His eyes simply conveyed a profound, heartbreaking shame at having to admit his desperate need, a visible and agonizing plea that cut through all of Kaito's carefully constructed intellectual barriers and rationalizations of self-preservation, demanding an immediate, unvarnished response. Kaito instinctively clutched his small, precious canteen tighter beneath the folds of his simple robe, the cool, familiar metal feeling like a temporary lifeline in the immense, desolate desert of the suffering village. He could feel the desperate thirst already beginning to tighten his own throat and constrict his jaw, an uncomfortable, very real physical sensation that screamed at him to preserve the little resource he possessed. This was the true, ultimate test of dana. Not giving from abundance, which is easy and requires no true sacrifice, but giving completely from a place of painful, immediate lack, facing the terrifying consequence of personal, physical want without hesitation. Remembering the Master's explicit instruction about the necessity of abandoning self-interest in the act of giving, Kaito slowly and deliberately drew the canteen out from under his robe, his hand shaking slightly with the intense internal conflict between selfish survival and selfless service. He hesitated for only a brief, agonizing moment, staring intensely at the small, clear droplets of life-sustaining liquid clinging to the internal metal, acknowledging the powerful pull of the primal fear of not having enough to endure the hardship ahead. He knew then that the true measure of generosity was entirely defined by the genuine pain and significant sacrifice inherent in the act of giving. With a deep, intentional breath that centered his fluctuating thoughts, Kaito pushed the intense fear away completely and extended his hand, pressing the heavy canteen firmly into the young man's grateful, trembling palm. He spoke gently, ensuring his voice carried no trace of the powerful internal struggle he had just fiercely overcome, saying simply, "Take this entirely. Do not hurry. Give your father whatever he needs immediately and worry about absolutely nothing else but his current comfort." The weight of the world, which had seemed to press down physically on Kaito's shoulders moments before, immediately lifted, replaced by an unexpected and profound lightness, a pure, clean internal release. The young man, overwhelmed with intense gratitude, immediately tried to find words to express his deep thanks and offered to return the empty canteen immediately after his father drank, making promises of eternal recompense and loyalty. Kaito stopped him gently, with a barely perceptible shake of his head, understanding that accepting gratitude or promising repayment would utterly destroy the profound, pure quality of the selfless gift he had just offered, contaminating the Dana Paramita with the subtle impurity of expected return and transactional exchange, transforming it back into a mere act of calculated trade rather than unconditional offering. Kaito's subsequent thought was a powerful echo of a foundational teaching, reinforcing the profound realization he had just experienced through selfless action. He recalled a vital lesson frequently cited in the Zen tradition. If you light a lamp for somebody else, it will also profoundly brighten your own challenging path. He understood now that the light he sought through years of rigorous solitary study was not found in the abstract theoretical pages of a book, but was spontaneously generated and fully experienced in the very moment he released his own profound need to save the other person from suffering, realizing a tangible, immediate spiritual benefit far greater than mere intellectual satisfaction. The fear of the grueling, dehydrating journey ahead instantly dissolved entirely, replaced by a deep, unshakable certainty that his actions were now fundamentally aligned with the compassionate heart of the Dharma, a powerful internal realization that provided far more sustaining energy than the small measure of water he had just physically surrendered. He recognized that the practice of dana was not just about sharing material possessions, but much more fundamentally about actively sharing the painful experience of lack and vulnerability with others, fully accepting the inevitable consequences of his generous action without resentment or fear of personal hardship. Kaito settled back down beneath the inadequate shade of the fig tree, no longer attempting the rigid structure of formal meditation, but simply observing the intense movement of the dusty air and the low murmur of the village around him, finding a profound, unexpected quietude within the very center of the surrounding, pervasive chaos and deprivation. He had finally begun the difficult, active transition from merely studying the paramitas as theoretical concepts to actually embodying them fully in concrete, physically demanding reality, realizing that the first great lesson of the journey, the gift of little, required the greatest, most absolute surrender of all, the relentless, self-serving preoccupation with the safety and comfort of the self, the hand that expects nothing. Kaito sat against the rough wall of the empty well, the fierce sun now directly overhead, its relentless heat seeming to draw the last vestiges of moisture from his body, leaving him feeling utterly hollowed out, both physically exhausted and spiritually exposed by the morning's profound, intense events. The true magnitude of his selfless act of surrender, the complete giving away of his last remaining personal water supply, began to manifest as an intense, deep-seated physical weakness, a dizzying emptiness that was a stark, painful contrast to the comforting spiritual lightness he had momentarily achieved, forcing him to understand that selfless service often requires the heavy, immediate cost of personal, physical depletion. He understood that the easy joy of intellectual realization must always be balanced by the difficult, demanding reality of physical pain and profound, absolute exhaustion. Just as he was beginning to recover a semblance of strength through sheer willpower, a sudden commotion erupted near the edge of the village, immediately snapping him out of his necessary, weary introspection. A tall, visibly distressed farmer named Rio, known for his volatile temper and his absolute reliance on the seasonal harvest that was now rapidly failing, stormed into the barren square, his face contorted into a mask of pure, unadulterated rage and overwhelming despair. He immediately spotted Kaito and advanced with quick, heavy steps, his voice thick and booming with loud accusations and deep, burning resentment, blaming the mountain temple directly for hoarding the precious water and allowing the entire valley to painfully wither and completely die away. Rio stood menacingly over Kaito, aggressively demanding immediate, concrete answers and immediate practical action, dismissing the monk's spiritual presence as nothing more than useless, ornamental formality, screaming, "You monks sit lazily up there in your luxurious, wet sanctuary, meditating uselessly on the nature of peace, while our children and our vital livelihood burn horribly down here beneath the scorching sun. Where is your fabled, powerful compassion now, monk? Give us the immediate access to the water that is rightfully ours. Stop hiding it selfishly behind your religious walls." Kaito felt a powerful, immediate surge of defensive anger rise rapidly within his chest, a primal, automatic reaction to the fierce injustice of the villager's false accusation and his complete misunderstanding of the temple's delicate, careful water management. Kaito instinctively wanted to rapidly defend his master and vehemently list all of his own exhausting, selfless efforts since arriving in the parched valley, pointing out the hypocrisy of Rio's demanding entitlement. Yet, the memory of the master's earlier crucial lesson on the selfless nature of Dana, demanding the complete relinquishment of the giver's ego and the absolute avoidance of any expectation of gratitude or recognition, quickly checked his immediate, defensive impulse. He realized with startling clarity that expecting gratitude or fighting accusations fiercely was merely another subtle, insidious form of selfish attachment, a profound demand for validation that completely nullified the purity of the previous charitable acts he had performed. He took a slow, deep, intentional breath, consciously focusing his entire awareness on the physical, burning sensation of Ryo's unrestrained, projected anger, choosing decisively to absorb the powerful, negative energy completely without returning the slightest hint of aggression or defensive resistance. Kaito understood then that the paramita of generosity was not only about sharing material goods, but fundamentally about sharing the burdens of others, even if those difficult burdens took the tangible form of utterly unjustified hostility and profound, aggressive, misplaced blame. His task was simply to be a stable, silent mirror, allowing the intensity of the farmer's pain to completely dissipate against the unmoving, silent surface of his disciplined, centered stillness. Kaito slowly raised his calm, steady eyes to meet the farmer's intensely burning gaze, maintaining a completely even, quiet tone despite the immediate threatening confrontation, and said, "I hear the profound, intense suffering in your powerful words, Ryo, and I sincerely understand the terrifying fear that drives your deep frustration. The temple's reserves are critically low, a painful truth I cannot immediately change, but I am certainly here now, fully present, and I will gladly listen carefully to every single detail of your crushing burden for as long as you need to speak." He offered not quick, empty excuses or useless, abstract philosophical advice, but only the extremely precious, profound gift of his complete, focused, non-judgmental attention, a simple but powerful act of profound human connection that immediately began to disarm the farmer's frantic rage. Kaito then recalled a potent, essential teaching, a profound, practical instruction of the Buddha regarding the management of intense anger and hostility. Holding on to bitterness, resentment, or anger is exactly like grasping a fiercely hot, burning coal with the firm intention of throwing it aggressively at someone else. You are the one who is painfully burned immediately and profoundly. He fully realized that Ryo's fierce, uncontrolled anger was, in fact, Ryo's most destructive, immediate suffering, and Kaito's generous, quiet refusal to fully engage with it meant that the dangerous, volatile coal simply fell harmlessly between them, leaving Kaito's own spirit untouched and profoundly unharmed. Faced with Kaito's utter lack of immediate resistance and his quiet, unmoving empathy, Ryo's initial aggressive momentum completely collapsed, his powerful shoulders visibly slumping heavily as the enormous tension slowly drained out of his exhausted, weary body. The farmer's fierce, demanding voice broke completely, softening into a deeply raw, agonizing sob of profound helplessness and overwhelming despair. He finally confessed that his confrontation was not truly about the critical water itself, but about the terrifying, unbearable shame he felt for failing utterly to provide adequately for his small, desperate family and the crushing weight of that terrible, self-imposed judgment. Kaito, now truly centered, did not offer any false, superficial sympathy or easy platitudes, but instead stood slowly, completely emptying his mind of any planned, formulated response. He gently placed his strong, steady hand on Ryo's broad, trembling shoulder, a simple, powerful gesture of shared burden and profound, wordless camaraderie. He offered the last, most significant remaining gift he possessed, his strong physical labor. He suggested immediately that they should pool their remaining exhausted energy to walk miles down the dry riverbed and search desperately for any lingering signs of hidden groundwater, committing himself fully to the demanding work of selfless companionship in the face of absolute crushing defeat. Kaito understood then, with absolute certainty, that true, profound generosity, the culminating achievement of the dana paramita, was not the mere, easy act of giving resources from a place of comfortable security or expected reward, but the complete, challenging willingness to fully surrender one's own sense of safety, one's cherished time, and most importantly, one's desperate, deeply ingrained need to be recognized, respected, or even remotely appreciated for the difficult, painful effort. Finding pure, profound peace in the absolute, immediate anonymity of selfless, immediate action. The shadow of the deal. Having faced the demanding, critical test of pure generosity, Kaito shifted his focused attention toward the next, immediate challenge facing the struggling village of Sotoko. The vital preparation for the eventual return of life-giving rain whenever it might arrive. The immediate, urgent need was no longer just water, which they could only wait for with immense patience, but the acquisition of a large quantity of specialized, drought-resistant seeds, a crucial, non-negotiable step toward ensuring a rapid, effective rebound and preventing widespread famine in the following season. Kaito realized that this logistical, practical challenge required a different, sharper kind of spiritual discipline, one firmly rooted in unwavering ethical conduct, known in the Dharma as sila. Kaito embarked on the arduous, dusty walk to the remote trading post located on the distant valley floor, the only place known to have the specialized, high-quality stock they desperately needed. He finally arrived at the heavily guarded premises of Master Chen, a merchant renowned throughout the entire region for his meticulous business sense, his keen, sharp eye for exploitation, and his complete, absolute monopoly over the best, most resilient strains of grain and the necessary agricultural supplies, especially during times of immense crisis and widespread scarcity, which only served to increase his exorbitant manipulative prices. Master Chen, a thin man with unnervingly sharp, calculating eyes and clothing that was noticeably cleaner and far more crisp than anyone else in the surrounding valley, greeted the young monk with an oily, elaborate display of false respect and profound curiosity. Kaito quickly explained the dire, desperate situation of the village and the absolute, immediate need for a large quantity of seeds. Chen quickly agreed that he possessed the finest, most reliable seeds available, perfectly suited for the quick, difficult recovery of the parched land, but then immediately quoted an impossibly steep, astronomical price, a number that was entirely based on exploiting the villagers' current, terrifying desperation, rather than on the intrinsic, actual value of the life-giving seeds. Seeing the visible, profound discouragement immediately wash over the monk's tired face, Chen leaned forward conspiratorially across the rough wooden counter, lowering his voice slightly to a hushed, tempting whisper. He then proposed a very subtle, insidious alternative deal that was utterly devoid of the need for any complex, immediate financial transaction. Chen explained that he desperately needed a tiny, consistent supply of pure, clean mountain water to maintain a secret, hidden nursery of highly valuable medicinal herbs located behind his storehouse, herbs that would yield a massive profit, and he offered the needed seeds in exchange for Kaito's silent, discreet cooperation in slightly diverting a minute, untraceable portion of the temple's daily water supply. The temptation was immediate, profound, and overwhelmingly appealing to Kaito's pragmatic side, as the mathematical calculation seemed irrefutable and entirely beneficial. A minuscule, virtually undetectable trickle of water, which would hardly be missed by the temple or the village, could instantly secure the necessary seeds and potential salvation for hundreds of starving people, preventing months of further suffering and desperation. Kaito began instantly to craft various internal justifications, the small minor ethical compromise would ultimately lead to a vast necessary good. The noble beneficial end perfectly justifies the small necessary means required to achieve it, a seductive, dangerous logic. But as Kaito prepared to accept the deceptively simple arrangement, a cold, sharp feeling of absolute unease settled heavily in his spiritual core. A painful sensation he immediately recognized as the pure, corrosive taint of impending corruption and deep moral compromise. He realized with powerful clarity that the paramita of sila, true ethical conduct, was not merely about avoiding the major, obvious crimes of lying and stealing, but primarily about maintaining profound, absolute integrity in the constant stream of small, everyday decisions, ensuring that the necessary means were always as pure and fundamentally moral as the highly desirable ends being sought. Kaito instantly recalled a fundamental, powerful teaching that reinforced his sudden spiritual awakening. He remembered the sage words of the Buddha, often repeated in the temple's ancient sutras. Wealth lost can always be replaced, but a man's reputation, when lost and entirely compromised, is the most profound and irreparable loss of all. The true wealth of life is not gold or possessions, but impeccable ethical conduct. He understood that the moral violation of the subtle, deceitful deal would permanently poison the deep, necessary trust between the temple and the desperately needy village, an intangible yet utterly essential asset that was far more valuable than the immediate physical relief offered by the precious seeds. Kaito straightened his simple robe, his moral resolve suddenly rigid and unyielding, meeting Chen's expectant gaze with a new, powerful firmness that startled the cynical merchant. He decisively and clearly refused the tempting offer, explaining to the cunning dealer that even the smallest, most secret act of ethical compromise was like introducing a single, deadly drop of poison into an entire life-giving river, irrevocably corrupting the purity of the necessary effort. The act of using deceit to acquire a beneficial outcome would permanently taint the resulting harvest with the bitter taste of deep dishonesty and underlying exploitation. Master Chen, a man accustomed to the predictable, easy pliability of desperate men, was clearly taken aback and deeply unsettled by the young monk's absolute, unwavering moral purity and his profound commitment to the difficult principle of sila, recognizing a stubborn, honest strength he could not possibly manipulate or simply ignore. He realized quickly that the young monk could not be successfully bought or easily compromised. After a moment of intense, uncomfortable silence, Chen reluctantly, grudgingly agreed to accept a fairer, more ethical system of trade, exchanging the necessary seeds for an equivalent value of future labor and honest, transparent exchange with the village. Kaito walked slowly away from the successful yet morally challenging negotiation, carrying the heavy bags of precious seeds, feeling a triumphant sense of profound internal peace that far outweighed the physical effort of the long journey home. He realized fully that the paramita of sila was the absolute bedrock upon which all other paramitas must be securely built, teaching him that the moral purity of the intention and the integrity of the difficult means used must always be protected and placed far above the immediate, tempting convenience of achieving any outcome, no matter how desirable or life-saving that outcome might immediately appear. The narrow path. Kaito returned triumphantly to the struggling village, the heavy bags of specialized seeds a tangible promise of future relief. Yet the temporary psychological victory he felt was instantly replaced by the overwhelming, pressing weight of the next critical, difficult decision. He quickly understood that resisting Master Chen's insidious, unethical manipulation had merely been the simple theoretical preparation. The true painful test of sila, the parameter of ethical conduct, now lay in the highly complex, agonizingly practical matter of distributing the critically limited resources justly and effectively within a deeply strained, suffering community. The scarcity meant that even the purest, most compassionate intention would inevitably lead to painful exclusions and immediate, bitter disappointment for many, forcing Kaito to confront the harsh, uncomfortable reality that ethical action often appears cold and distant from immediate, superficial emotional sympathy. The seeds were, by their very nature, a finite resource, acquired at immense moral cost, and the village land was severely fractured, with some plots offering rocky, almost impossible conditions, while others, owned by the stronger families, offered better prospects for rapid, large-scale germination and the subsequent necessary yields. Kaito immediately felt a profound, overwhelming pull toward a deeply compassionate approach, wanting desperately to distribute the precious seeds primarily based on immediate need, prioritizing the weakest, most vulnerable families whose land was the most arid and difficult to cultivate, driven by the pure, unadulterated spirit of Dana, the generosity he had just painfully mastered. However, Kaito realized with a sudden, jarring clarity that this impulsive, immediate act of sentimental kindness, while feeling noble and intensely satisfying to his ego, would constitute a serious failure of sila, a profound ethical compromise against the greater, more pressing collective good. If the strongest seeds were wasted on land with the lowest probability of success, the yield for the entire village would be catastrophically low, potentially condemning the entire community to a much longer period of devastating hunger and complete reliance on external aid. Sila, Kaito realized, demanded that he govern his actions not purely by sentiment, but by a higher, critical responsibility to the survival and immediate welfare of the entire village community, forcing him to set aside personal feelings. Seeking clear, objective counsel beyond his own intense emotional turmoil, Kaito consulted with the village elder, an aged woman named Hana, renowned for her unwavering patience and profound understanding of the difficult, unpredictable cycles of the natural land and the deeply interconnected village dynamics. Hana, looking directly into Kaito's worried eyes, immediately reinforced the crucial need for pure, pragmatic effectiveness, advising him that the ethical duty was not merely to comfort the immediate suffering, but to ensure the sustained, collective continuity of life itself, even if that demanded painful, selective choices in the present moment. Her ancient wisdom resonated deeply, confirming the difficult path he already instinctively knew he must follow with unshakable resolve. Guided by the elder's wise, non-sentimental counsel, Kaito initiated a meticulous, agonizing process of resource allocation, prioritizing the best, most viable plots that promised the absolute highest return on investment, a process that necessitated the painful, explicit exclusion of several families with intensely difficult, unfavorable growing conditions. This difficult decision ensured that the limited, precious seeds would produce the maximum amount of future sustenance for the greatest number of villagers, but it instantly placed Kaito in the uncomfortable, highly volatile position of being the direct enforcer of an intensely painful, deeply resented scarcity, turning the perceived blessing of the seeds into a new source of intense communal friction and inevitable division. The ethical severity of this specific choice struck Kaito with painful, immediate force. When a young, desperately needy mother, her face etched deeply with profound anxiety and raw exhaustion, approached him tearfully, pleading desperately for just a handful of the special seeds to plant on her small, intensely rocky slope. Her desperate appeal was a powerful, direct assault on Kaito's core compassion, tearing violently at the threads of his personal, immediate empathy. Yet he knew with an absolute heavy certainty that granting her request would be an ethical failure, a profound act of emotional betrayal toward the rest of the suffering village, whose future relied heavily on the strict, necessary discipline of effective resource management. He gently yet firmly refused her intense, tearful request, offering instead his committed promise to secure future, alternative aid specifically for her family, but maintaining the firm, rigid boundary of the necessary seed allocation plan. Kaito felt the sharp, immediate sting of her despair and the painful, implied accusation of his perceived cruelty, yet he stood unmoving, understanding deeply that this painful action was the very heart of practicing sila, doing the difficult, necessary thing that appeared outwardly harsh but was fundamentally right for the long-term collective survival. He realized that true ethics often required the temporary sacrifice of one's own immediate, comfortable sense of being the hero or the immediate comforter. Kaito reflected deeply on the complex, painful paradox of ethical governance, murmuring a fundamental core teaching of the Dharma to himself. The truly middle path does not mean avoiding difficult choices. It means avoiding the extremes of indulgence and self-denial, and acting with complete awareness and unwavering dedication to the highest good. He saw clearly that the middle path in this painful dilemma was not about dividing the scarce seeds equally, which would guarantee low yields for everyone, but about rigorously and transparently allocating them where they could produce the absolute greatest benefit, thereby establishing a necessary foundation of security and future hope for the greatest number of struggling individuals. The painful difficulty of the situation reaffirmed Kaito's growing, profound understanding that the paramita of sila was not a set of simple, comfortable rules designed for easy, peaceful living in a monastery, but a demanding, rigorous discipline designed specifically for making deeply complex, painful decisions in the volatile, messy realm of human interaction and suffering. He had to embody the painful truth that genuine, enduring kindness sometimes requires the immediate, unflinching delivery of intensely painful news or the imposition of necessary, deeply unwelcome structure, forcing the suffering individual to temporarily bear a great burden for the profound and essential benefit of the immediate collective. Kaito realized that the burden of truly ethical, responsible action was precisely its ability to cause immediate, deep internal discomfort because it brutally forced him to prioritize abstract, rigorous principles over the powerful, immediate gratification of emotional sentimentality. The integrity of his actions was now rooted not in feeling good, but in doing good, regardless of the painful emotional cost. The truth of action. Despite the highly controversial and painful nature of the seed distribution, Kaito's unwavering transparency regarding the allocation process ensured that the resulting anger of the excluded villagers was directed at the harsh, terrifying realities of the drought itself, rather than at any perceived or actual manipulation by the temple or the monk. The ethical foundation of sila, built upon complete, uncompromising honesty, had successfully stabilized the volatile communal spirit, allowing the focus to remain primarily on the collective planting and the desperately needed preparations for the coming necessary harvest, a huge success that was entirely dependent on their current, massive labor. However, the agonizing process of necessary rationing and planning had barely begun when a far more immediate and potentially catastrophic problem arose, threatening to completely shatter the fragile, temporary peace Kaito had painstakingly established. While performing a routine, necessary inspection of the temple's upper reservoir, the primary source of the critical mountain spring water, Kaito discovered a painful, frightening truth. Due to unexpectedly high solar evaporation and the development of a small, barely perceptible fissure in the ancient, porous bedrock, the reserve contained significantly less water than the original, careful projections had initially indicated. Kaito immediately calculated the dire, profound implications of this devastating discovery. If he were to immediately announce the new, terrifying reduction in the available water supply, the immediate fear would certainly transform instantly into paralyzing panic, likely causing the villagers to completely abandon the crucial, necessary work of planting the specialized seeds, fearing that the seeds would simply wither and die immediately in the dry, unyielding earth. He experienced a powerful, immediate ethical tug, the intense temptation to withhold the painful, difficult information for just a few critical, necessary days or even weeks, just enough time to allow the seeds to take root securely before revealing the terrifying, harsh truth. The rationale for the powerful lie was compelling and intensely seductive, rooted deeply in the sincere desire to prevent massive communal chaos and to protect the long-term success of the crucial planting initiative. Kaito rationalized intensely, surely a small temporary withholding of the difficult truth, a minor deceit performed out of pure, deep-seated compassion, is easily forgiven, especially when the final positive outcome is the ultimate salvation and survival of the entire village community. This rationalization felt immediately easier, softer, and far more comforting than the devastating, immediate confrontation he knew absolute honesty would force him to immediately face head-on. Kaito walked slowly along the dusty, arid path back down the mountain, intensely reviewing the foundational principle of right speech, or samavaka, a critical component of sila. He recalled the master's potent, essential warning that a lie, no matter how tiny or how purely well-intentioned, is always a profound spiritual breach, a fundamental act that immediately introduces a painful element of profound falseness into the flow of reality and the necessary relationship between people. He realized clearly that the peace achieved through any deception, even a small so-called white lie, was built upon a dangerous, volatile foundation of profound illusion, destined inevitably to collapse violently and painfully when the harsh, true reality finally broke through the fragile, temporary deception. He saw the immediate, profound danger in adopting the subtle, seductive stance of the benevolent dictator, deciding unilaterally what harsh truths the villagers were spiritually ready to accept or emotionally prepared to handle. This specific act of ethical control would be a direct, unforgivable echo of Master Chen's earlier, insidious temptation, merely substituting paternalistic concern for economic manipulation. Kaito realized that maintaining impeccable ethical conduct meant that the necessary means of the moment must fully align with the fundamental truth of the ultimate, desired end, demanding absolute and continuous transparency regardless of the powerful, immediate, feared consequences. Gathering his absolute resolve, Kaito immediately called an intensely difficult, necessary meeting in the center of the village, addressing the weary, anxious crowd with a clear, steady voice that fully betrayed none of his immense internal apprehension. He revealed the painful exact details of the significantly reduced water reserves and the terrifying implications for the necessary future rationing, carefully presenting the difficult, raw facts without any embellishment or subtle deflection. The initial, immediate reaction was exactly as he had deeply feared, a wave of profound, palpable fear, immediately followed by loud, intense shouting and highly volatile expressions of deeply rooted, immense anger and despair. Kaito stood silently, centered and unmoving amidst the rising storm of the villagers' fear, embodying the stable, silent principle he had absorbed from the ancient sutras. He recalled the essential, universal words of the Buddha. 3 things absolutely cannot be long hidden: the sun, the moon, and the truth. By immediately and uncompromisingly revealing the harsh, difficult truth, Kaito allowed the fear and the intense anger to focus immediately on the problem itself, on the drought, rather than allowing it to fester and quickly metastasize into deep, profound communal resentment and corrosive mistrust directed entirely toward the temple. Through the intensely painful, difficult exercise of completely unwavering transparency, Kaito finally understood the profound and essential purpose of Sila. It was the powerful, ethical commitment to seeing and interacting with the absolute, unvarnished reality exactly as it truly is, rejecting the comfortable, easy temptation of temporary illusions or manipulation. The only path toward genuine, enduring peace and long-term stability in the desperately suffering village was not through comforting lies, but solely through the unwavering, difficult practice of the naked, powerful truth, the irritating heat. The relentless, oppressive heat of the valley settled heavily upon Kaito, a physical manifestation of the immense frustration and profound impatience that rapidly boiled beneath his carefully maintained monastic calm, constantly threatening to break the fragile ethical resolve he had painstakingly established. The arid, dusty air shimmered visibly above the cracked earth, and the unrelenting high noon sun beat down mercilessly, transforming the crucial task of organizing the limited water distribution and preparing the fields into an agonizingly slow, deeply draining psychological exercise, which seemed designed specifically to test the very limits of human endurance and mental composure. Kaito found himself constantly chafing against the village elders' bureaucratic slowness and the measured, seemingly deliberate pace of the local laborers, perceiving their careful, traditional methods as reckless inefficiency that directly endangered the urgent mission of survival. Kaito's internal monologue was a relentless, critical stream, constantly comparing the speed of the immediate need with the perceived inertia of the valley's inhabitants, a judgment that was harsh and profoundly unfair given their profound physical exhaustion and crippling lack of resources. Why, he silently demanded, could they not execute the plan he had meticulously formulated with greater urgency, with more focused, relentless energy, recognizing the immediate, terrifying proximity of famine and complete ruin that perpetually loomed over them? His carefully structured mind, so accustomed to the highly disciplined rhythm and absolute silence of the mountain temple, struggled intensely to reconcile its urgent internal clock with the slow, almost primordial rhythm of life dictated by the harsh, unforgiving drought. The sheer difficulty of the continuous practice of Sila, the ethical conduct, was rapidly replaced by the intense, burning challenge of Kshanti, the paramita of patience and deep forbearance, a discipline Kaito realized he had previously only encountered and understood in abstract, theoretical terms within the quiet, controlled environment of the temple library. He had mastered the difficult ability to act rightly, but he discovered with immediate, shocking discomfort that he was utterly incapable of waiting rightly, of accepting the necessary painful delay between his intense, well-intentioned action and the desired positive result without spiraling into bitter, volatile internal conflict and profound emotional turmoil. The constant, gnawing irritation was a powerful, palpable heat generated entirely from within, far hotter and more devastating than the relentless external sun that baked the barren earth. One particularly grueling afternoon, as Kaito supervised the meticulously slow, painstaking construction of a temporary emergency water reservoir designed to minimize further evaporation, he became acutely, painfully frustrated by the incessant, high-pitched chatter and the visible, unhurried movements of two elderly women who were carefully sorting stones nearby. His deep breath, intended as a powerful centering technique, failed immediately to quell the immediate searing impulse to sharply rebuke them, to demand forcefully that they immediately focus on the essential labor with the necessary seriousness and urgent speed the situation absolutely required. The feeling was profoundly toxic, the kind of corrosive, powerful anger that instantly poisons the mind, transforming necessary discipline into tyrannical control, completely blurring the ethical lines he had fought so hard to establish and fiercely maintain. He retreated immediately to the thin, sparse shade of a sickly acacia tree, attempting a desperate, silent period of necessary meditation to quell the rising internal storm. But the intense effort failed spectacularly. The buzzing sound of the insects, the distant, dull clang of the hammers, and the visible, deeply unsettling lethargy of the exhausted workers instantly became insurmountable obstacles, amplified unbearably by the raging sound of his own, loud, profound mental resistance. Kaito finally understood the fundamental, essential lesson of Kshanti. It was not merely about waiting idly for things to change naturally, but about actively cultivating a deep, powerful acceptance of the present reality and the specific, immutable pace of change, without simultaneously adding the devastating psychological burden of powerful resistance and profound judgment. Later that very same evening, after a highly exhausting and profoundly unproductive day, Kaito received a small, tightly rolled scroll delivered mysteriously by a tired, dusty young boy from the temple, containing only a few precise brushstrokes in Master Hoshi's immediately recognizable, elegant hand. The concise, cryptic message offered no immediate comfort or direct instruction, but instead presented a pointed, ancient teaching designed to focus the mind. The trouble is, you think you have time. Kaito reread the potent words repeatedly under the soft, cooling light of the single oil lamp, initially interpreting the phrase as a profound, urgent command to move faster, to push harder, to act with greater intensity immediately. Yet, as Kaito considered the master's deep, subtle wisdom and his profound patience over many years, the true, agonizingly difficult meaning of the teaching began slowly to sink in, like cold, necessary water penetrating the dry, hard earth. The profound impatience Kaito currently felt was not rooted in the simple, objective reality of the limited time remaining, but solely in his arrogant psychological attachment to the immediate subjective belief that he should, by his own superior effort, be able to dictate or forcefully accelerate the external pace of the slow-moving world around him. He realized that the illusion of control, the destructive thought that he could somehow rush the complicated process of recovery, was the true, subtle source of his intense internal suffering and relentless irritation. Kaito sat quietly, long into the night, wrestling intensely with this new, extremely uncomfortable reality, recognizing the destructive arrogance inherent in his intense frustration, which was essentially a profound refusal to accept the reality of the village's current deep exhaustion and the fundamental, inescapable slowness of natural cycles. He acknowledged fully that the drought's severity meant that swift, magical resolution was impossible, and that the recovery would inevitably be agonizingly long, arduous, and constantly frustrating, demanding consistent effort rather than sporadic, violent bursts of exhausting activity driven purely by his own intellectual impatience and emotional volatility. This realization fundamentally shifted Kaito's internal focus from the futile attempt to control the speed of the external world to the far more necessary, immediate task of managing and stabilizing his own turbulent, profoundly reactive mind. Kshanti, he finally understood, was the demanding, profound discipline of accepting the deeply unchangeable reality of the agonizing weight, allowing the necessary actions to be performed with total, unhurried diligence and complete thoroughness, knowing that true sustainable momentum is built patiently over time, brick by painful, repetitive brick, rather than achieved through frantic, desperate haste or emotional force. He resolved firmly to embrace the heavy, sticky heat and the slow pace, not as immediate, volatile obstacles to be violently overcome, but as constant, critical spiritual instruments designed to sharpen his intense focus and continuously refine his internal, powerful discipline, teaching him the necessary stillness that must reside at the very core of all meaningful, necessary action, regardless of the painful external pressure or frustrating environmental conditions. Waiting for the seed. The transition from the immediate necessary crisis of ethical distribution to the long, agonizingly slow phase of waiting was, for Kaito, a far more profound and unexpected trial of his spiritual discipline than the initial intense heat or the painful bureaucratic slowness he had initially encountered. The specialty seeds, acquired at a high ethical cost, were now carefully placed in the earth, and the highly reduced, heavily rationed water supply was meticulously channeled to them each day, yet the deeply uncomfortable, unsettling waiting period for the first visible signs of life stretched into weeks, testing the very limits of his profound belief and emotional endurance. The constant, overwhelming pressure of the possibility of total catastrophic failure weighed heavily on Kaito, constantly feeding a relentless internal stream of obsessive, debilitating doubt that was difficult to ignore. Kaito began the demanding, stressful routine of inspecting the newly planted fields multiple times a day, sometimes even checking them desperately in the pre-dawn darkness, his mind relentlessly calculating the exact rate of evaporation and obsessing over the precise, necessary depth of the soil moisture, exhibiting a profound, deep-seated anxiety that directly countered the very principles of detachment he had sworn to uphold fiercely. His fervent desire was for an immediate, undeniable sign of success, a visible confirmation that his immense efforts and the excruciating ethical compromises had been entirely justified and not merely a dramatic, tragic waste of the village's last, precious resources and their remaining sliver of collective hope. He vividly recalled the master's ancient teachings on the destructive nature of immediate, intense attachment to results, understanding intellectually that true, powerful action is intrinsically complete in the very moment of its honest performance, regardless of the ultimate, external outcome. However, the raw, profound, visceral fear of impending collective starvation made this ancient, detached wisdom feel like an impossible, cold luxury, a philosophical ideal completely divorced from the heavy, crushing reality of the barren, parched field stretching endlessly before him, where the silence was not peaceful but intensely pregnant with the imminent threat of catastrophic failure and widespread despair. One humid, seemingly endless afternoon, Kaito observed an elderly wizened farmer, known simply as Jiro, sitting patiently on a large, smooth stone at the field's edge, simply watching the dead, motionless earth with a tranquil, profound stillness that Kaito found both immediately frustrating and intensely captivating. Jiro was not inspecting the field for new sprouts or obsessively worrying about the soil's moisture. He was merely present, observing the quiet, profound stillness of the valley with a deep, effortless calm that seemed completely immune to the urgent external pressures of the dire situation. Kaito approached him slowly, unable to contain his profound intellectual curiosity and spiritual need for immediate guidance. Kaito finally broke the long, intense silence, asking the elderly farmer with a tone heavy with immediate frustration, "Do you not fear the total loss, Elder Jiro? Do you not feel the absolute need to somehow hasten the growth of the seeds?" Jiro slowly turned his gaze, his ancient, knowing eyes fixed gently upon Kaito, and simply responded with the quiet, profound authority of someone who had intensely witnessed countless cycles of both life and painful death, saying that attempting to force the seed to open prematurely is the surest, quickest path to destroying the inherent life force within it completely. Jiro's powerful, simple words resonated deeply, forcing Kaito to realize that his deep impatience was not a righteous, necessary pressure, but a profound act of violent disrespect toward the intricate, perfect rhythm of the natural world and the delicate, precise timing of the seed itself. He began to practice a new form of powerful, active meditation directly in the field, centering his frantic attention not on the futile act of forcing the growth of the seed, but on the simple, constant repetition of his gentle, repetitive breathing and the immense, quiet, life-affirming dedication of the necessary daily watering ritual. This demanding, powerful new practice was the profound cultivation of patience as a direct, conscious habit, constantly redirecting his naturally wandering, anxious mind away from the distant, fearful outcome and back immediately to the pure, simple act of providing the current, essential nourishment to the soil. Kaito remembered a specific, vital teaching of the Buddha. Even a thought, when often repeated, will become an action, and an action, when often repeated, will become a habit. He deeply recognized that the specific thought of immediate anxiety needed to be relentlessly replaced by the powerful, stabilizing thought of unwavering, sustained presence in the difficult, agonizing moment. This necessary repeated centering finally bore its initial tiny fruit, both internally and externally, when Kaito looked down one crucial, humid morning and finally spotted a barely visible, perfect, tender green shoot violently breaking the dry, cracked surface of the sterile brown earth near his feet. It was an intensely fragile, yet absolutely undeniable victory, a testament not to the success of his intense, frantic efforts, but to the powerful, enduring patience of the seed itself, which had completely honored its own intrinsic, necessary timing, totally independent of the relentless, external pressure of human expectation. Kaito finally understood that true Kshanti, the profound paramita of patience, was not simply about passively enduring the painful wait, but about actively cultivating a deep, powerful trust in the necessary, intrinsic order of the universe and the natural, slow process of things. It demanded a deep, complete acceptance of the agonizing gap between the initiated action and the ultimate desired result, allowing the work to proceed with total, unhurried diligence, free from the volatile, corrosive influence of personal, intense anxiety or the fear of inevitable, painful failure. The stone on the path. The immense task of carving the new, essential water channel into the unforgiving, hard granite mountainside was immediately revealed to be far more brutally demanding than Kaito had ever mentally prepared for. exceeding even the most pessimistic projections of sheer difficulty. The rock was intensely cold and brutally unyielding, requiring aggressive, explosive force with every single jarring swing of the heavy iron pickaxe, and the small amount of loose, dusty earth they managed to clear quickly tumbled back down the steep slope, mocking their intense, continuous efforts and constantly threatening to crush their powerful, fragile morale. Kaito's calloused hands were immediately ripped open within the first grueling hour, quickly bleeding freely onto the worn wooden handle of his tool, transforming the intense physical sensation of gripping the rough wood into a sharp, constant, excruciating reminder of his profound, absolute commitment. For the initial agonizing day, Kaito worked entirely alone, relentlessly pushing his severely strained body far beyond the previously established limits of pain and crushing fatigue, the sound of his lone, repetitive effort echoing sharply and hollowly in the otherwise profound, oppressive silence of the immense valley, acting as a strange, persistent challenge to the pervasive, paralyzing inertia of despair that had completely enveloped the profoundly exhausted village below. The skeptical villagers watched him closely from a great distance, completely immobile, their faces profoundly etched with a mixture of overwhelming pity and intensely skeptical amusement, convinced that his immense, relentless effort was nothing more than the temporary, desperate spasm of a deeply misguided youth who would certainly succumb immediately to the inevitable exhaustion before the searing sun fully set. Kaito realized immediately that the true core meaning of sustained effort, virya, was not about the explosive, powerful strength of his intensely straining muscles or the impressive, temporary velocity of his pickaxe swings, but the subtle, relentless, profound ability to simply show up consistently and continue the required essential work after the sharp, immediate pain and the initial burst of motivating enthusiasm had completely vanished. He intensely remembered a simple, profound teaching of the Mestre Hoshi, which resonated deeply with the sheer physical difficulty of the task. The journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. For Kaito, this specific single step was simply the sheer, absolute refusal to consciously drop the heavy tool and intentionally surrender to the overwhelming, paralyzing numbness of profound exhaustion. The immediate exhaustion Kaito experienced was a subtle, insidious foe, far more psychological than purely physical, manifesting not as sudden, spectacular collapse, but as a corrosive, deep weariness that constantly whispered intensely tempting rationalizations into his intensely focused mind. You have already done enough. You deserve to rest. This work is ultimately futile. This subtle, mental warfare was significantly harder to conquer than the physical resistance of the unyielding rock face, demanding a precise, conscious, continuous application of intense, unwavering attention to the necessary present moment, refusing the powerful, damaging luxury of any future projection of the task's overwhelming remaining scale. To combat the intense mental and physical pain, Kaito quickly began using the sharp, immediate physical ache in his strained arms and shoulders, not as an intense warning sign to immediately stop, but as a profound, reliable object of highly focused meditation, a precise physical anchor to the severe, demanding reality of the intense present moment. He completely dissolved the conceptual idea of his struggling self from the necessary continuous action, understanding that he was not Kaito who was intensely digging, but merely the dynamic, continuous, necessary movement of digging, transforming the strenuous, painful labor into a highly demanding, uninterrupted form of pure practical zazen, seated meditation. By the late cooling afternoon, one heavily bearded elder, deeply moved and profoundly shamed by Kaito's intense, uncompromising commitment, and his unwavering, relentless pace, cautiously approached the worksite, bringing a small, much-needed skin of warm, stagnant water and a heavy, rusty shovel, silently taking his place beside the exhausted young monk. This single, silent act of profound solidarity became the necessary, crucial catalyst. Soon, others followed, joining the immense collective effort, not because of a profound surge of powerful, immediate hope, but because the monk's intense, visible diligence had finally presented them with a tangible, immediate opportunity to productively channel their immense, previously debilitating despair into focused, practical action. Kaito immediately found himself reluctantly coordinating the increasingly complex effort, realizing with growing clarity that maintaining the powerful collective energy of the intensely skeptical workers was far more demanding than maintaining his own intense, individual pace. He observed that their highly visible effort would frequently spike aggressively after a small, encouraging success, only to plummet instantly into paralyzing lethargy when the work became unexpectedly hard or the sun's intense heat peaked during the brutal midday hours, showcasing a profound lack of sustained, constant application necessary for true virya. He taught them a critically important principle, translated immediately from the profound, demanding discipline of the temple garden. Do not strive for the violent, sudden surge of the overflowing river, which quickly dries up, but seek the quiet, relentless, powerful consistency of the ever-flowing, necessary stream. He meticulously emphasized the profound value of highly controlled, consistent, rhythmic movements over the temporary, exhausting bursts of intense speed, stressing that the true, necessary virtue was not in the immediate speed of the task, but in the profound, unwavering refusal to stop completely or even significantly slow down until the clearly established daily quota was completely met. The profound, ceaseless scraping of the heavy shovels and the sharp, rhythmic clang of the tools against the brutally hard rock became a deep, unified, collective heartbeat, pulsating relentlessly against the immense silence of the mountain face, physically and spiritually reshaping Kaito's profoundly exhausted body and his intensely focused mind. His previously weak, scholar's arms quickly gained powerful new muscle mass. His palms solidified into thick, rough leather, but most importantly, his spirit found a new, necessary resilience, anchored completely to the continuous, grueling requirement of physical work, a realization that profound truth was found not only in the lofty, silent pages of the sacred sutras, but deeply embedded in the harsh, demanding reality of the dry earth. As the sun finally began to set, casting long, deeply exaggerated shadows that seemed to instantly swallow the meager, visible progress they had intensely achieved, Kaito looked intensely at the short, newly carved trench, barely 5 meters long, yet representing a monumental unified victory over total resignation and debilitating despair. This small, agonizing path forward, carved out centimeter by agonizing centimeter, stood as the profound, silent testament to the absolute, unwavering power of pure, continuous, necessary diligence, the very definition of the necessary perfection of virya, which demanded complete, total commitment, regardless of the initial, overwhelming opposition. The pure motivation. Weeks quickly dissolved into a brutal, unforgiving blur of continuous, focused labor, marked solely by the increasing thickness of the necessary dust and the ever-growing, agonizing length of the precarious, winding water channel, which now aggressively snaked a significant distance up the sheer granite slope. The intense, demanding work had transformed the entire unified community, substituting their previous paralyzing despair with the demanding, unifying purpose of continuous, selfless physical effort, forging a new, profound bond between the previously demoralized villagers and Kaito, the relentless young monk who had initially led the monumental charge. One profoundly tiring midday, a frail, elderly woman whose fields had been among the first and worst affected by the devastating drought, gently approached Kaito with a small, highly treasured offering of dried fruit and a deeply humble, sincere bow, expressing her profound, overwhelming gratitude for his relentless self-sacrificing efforts. She spoke softly, her fragile voice thick with pure emotion and intense relief, praising him profusely as the sacred valley's ultimate savior, a single, powerful ray of pure light in their terrifying, absolute darkness, a visible symbol of hope returned to the desperate community. Kaito immediately felt an involuntary, powerful surge of deep, intense pleasure instantly warm his deeply aching chest. A subtle, profound confirmation of his own personal worth and the profound visible success of his relentless efforts. A highly addictive feeling that was quickly followed by an immediate deep spiritual uneasiness. He quickly returned to the arduous, demanding labor, but instantly found his intense efforts sluggish, heavier, and inexplicably strained. The sharp, focused edge of his previous, unwavering concentration had suddenly become dull and intensely compromised, the rhythmic, relentless flow of his virya strangely interrupted and deeply diminished. He immediately paused, leaning heavily on the handle of his intensely vibrating shovel, deeply analyzing the immediate, profound shift in his mental and physical state, realizing with shocking clarity the immense, subtle trap of seeking external, profound validation. When he had worked entirely for the sheer pure benefit of the desperate villagers, entirely without the expectation of any personal reward or visible recognition, his profound energy had felt completely limitless, drawn powerfully from the pure source of impartial, active compassion. But the instant he internalized the elder's profound praise, the effort immediately became tied powerfully to his own small, fragile ego, instantly making the energy finite and severely dependent on the volatile external feedback he could not ultimately control. This profound, subtle realization served as a powerful, necessary correction to his rapidly evolving understanding of true diligence, reinforcing a precise, vital Buddhist teaching. If you knew what I know about the power of giving, you would not let a single meal pass without sharing it. Kaito understood immediately that this profound wisdom extended far beyond the immediate sharing of simple food, encompassing the total, complete sharing of one's powerful, absolute energy without any expectation of profound, immediate or future return, making the total absence of expectation the sole, necessary prerequisite for boundless, inexhaustible power. He consciously, deliberately removed his entire focus from the powerful, positive image of himself as the valley's savior, and forcefully centered his intense attention instead on the immediate, profound sensation of the heavy, unforgiving shovel scraping relentlessly against the hard rock, and the clear, powerful mental image of the pure, cold water that would eventually flow down to the desperate, parched lips of the suffering children. This profound, immediate shift in the precise internal object of his necessary attention instantly restored the profound rhythmic flow of his intense, relentless energy, instantly releasing the immense internal burden of seeking external, superficial validation. Kaito actively began to observe the highly volatile energy levels of the other intensely working villagers, noting clearly how quickly those who sought to immediately impress him or compete intensely with the strongest workers would inevitably exhaust themselves and loudly complain bitterly about their physical pain. Their powerful effort was fueled intensely by their own personal ego or intense rivalry, ultimately destined for immediate collapse, while the profound energy of those who simply focused entirely on the immediate task at hand, often the older, quieter workers, remained remarkably constant and profoundly reliable, steadily carrying them through the brutal, prolonged hardships of the demanding day. He quickly resolved to radically deepen his crucial practice of pure, selfless motivation by completely removing himself immediately from the intense, visible center of the working group, intentionally choosing the most difficult, remote, and highly undesirable sections of the channel, where his rigorous, focused efforts would be entirely unseen and therefore completely unpraised by the other intensely working villagers. This deliberate, profound retreat from the intense spotlight was not an act of intense humility, but a practical, demanding method of rigorously testing and continuously strengthening the pure, internal source of his constantly needed, inexhaustible motivation. He realized that the true, immense challenge of virya was not merely the demanding act of sustained, continuous effort, but the immensely difficult, lifelong task of continuously purifying the profound, subtle intention behind that continuous, visible effort, ensuring that the necessary energy was always drawn from the vast, pure reservoir of profound, boundless compassion, rather than the small, highly volatile well of his own intense personal ego. By the profound end of that incredibly long day, his deeply strained body was aching severely, his tired mind was intensely clear, and he knew definitively that true, necessary diligence was achieved only when the rigorous, demanding effort itself became the final, ultimate reward, entirely released from the immense, debilitating burden of expectation, flowing naturally and purely from profound, selfless service to the suffering world. The rhythm of the shovel. The intense, rigorous work of shaping the raw, demanding channel continued its relentless, unwavering pace, but for Kaito, the exhausting physical labor began to subtly transform from a demanding test of sheer endurance into a powerful, practical form of intense, sustained meditation, where the simple, repetitive movements of his deeply aching body became an intricate, hypnotic dance of pure, focused attention. The deliberate, heavy swing of his worn pickaxe, the necessary, precise placement of his intensely straining feet on the uneven, slippery rock, and the sharp, powerful intake of his intensely burning breath ceased to be individual, disparate actions, instead melting into one seamless, unified flow, tethering his frequently wandering mind entirely and forcefully to the sheer, demanding reality of the absolute, immediate present moment. The constant, metallic sound of the heavy shovel scraping persistently against the hard, unyielding granite. A sound that had initially been a sharp, grating annoyance, and a cruel, constant reminder of the painful, grinding difficulty of the immense task, now gradually assumed the profound, calming quality of a deep, resonant mantra, a persistent, rhythmic hum that continuously anchored his profound awareness. He completely let go of all thoughts concerning the vast remaining distance of the immense channel still to be carved, entirely releasing all intense worry about the persistent drought or the unpredictable weather, allowing his intensely focused consciousness to completely dissolve into the pure, immediate cycle of effort and release, finding profound, temporary refuge in the powerful simplicity of the essential, repetitive motion. In this intense, focused state of deep absorption, Kaito intensely observed the minute, detailed sensations within his deeply strained body with profound, unwavering clarity. The intense, persistent burn in his severely stretched shoulders, the steady rhythmic drumming of his beating heart against his tired ribs, and the persistent, slow rivulet of intensely hot sweat that silently traced a difficult, zigzag path down the side of his extremely dusty, sun-baked face. These intense, palpable sensations were no longer experienced as sharp obstacles to be urgently overcome, but merely as precise, neutral data points, immediate, constant affirmations of the immense, profound vitality and the intense, persistent reality of the necessary continuous effort being exerted. He suddenly realized that Mestre Hoshi had intentionally sent him into this strenuous, profoundly challenging labor, not merely to urgently deliver desperately needed water, but to precisely teach him the vital, profound lesson that pure zazen, true seated meditation, was not exclusively confined to the profound, silent stillness of the revered temple cushion, but could be fully and actively practiced within the intense, demanding activity of the material world. The intense, demanding requirement of constant focused awareness needed to safely avoid intensely injuring himself or a nearby fellow worker with the heavy, sharp tools forced an immediate, total concentration that was often significantly harder to sustain during the comfortable, quiet solitude of the serene meditation hall. The intellectual, conceptual self, Kaito, the young monk, intensely worried about his ultimate enlightenment and his immediate spiritual progress, completely vanished during these long, demanding hours of relentless, focused effort, replaced entirely by the profound, deep stillness that resides at the core of continuous, active, selfless service. There was merely the demanding, continuous movement of the heavy tool, the necessary, repetitive action of the body, and the necessary, essential need of the desperate valley below, an active, vivid realization of the fundamental concept that selflessness is not a temporary, spiritual achievement, but a continuous, active state of profound, absolute integration with the essential work at hand. Kaito silently recalled one of the Buddha's most powerful, practical teachings, which resonated deeply with the arduous, demanding effort required to complete the necessary task. Do not dwell in the immediate past. Do not actively dream of the distant future. Concentrate the entire focused mind on the absolute, demanding present moment. This profound wisdom became the necessary, sharp edge of his intensely focused consciousness, instantly cutting through any intrusive, distracting thought that attempted to pull him away from the sheer, profound reality of the necessary, specific shovel swing, ensuring that every single demanding movement was entirely fresh, totally complete, and profoundly intentional. He found that the required rhythm of the intense, demanding labor quickly established a profound, deep stillness in his intensely focused mind, a stillness that was far more powerful and far more resilient than the previously experienced stillness achieved through mere intentional physical immobility. This active, dynamic stillness was completely unburdened by the usual, debilitating mental fight against persistent noise or distracting thoughts. The sheer, relentless intensity of the necessary physical work simply left no energetic space, no mental capacity for the highly frivolous, distracting narratives of the relentless, churning ego. The extreme, oppressive heat and the constantly irritating, fine dust that relentlessly coated his entire body were fully embraced as crucial, necessary components of the total, intense experience, not resisted as temporary, external discomforts. By fully accepting the total, encompassing reality of the harsh, demanding work environment, Kaito quickly ceased to suffer intensely from the constant expectation that the situation should be fundamentally easier or significantly different, immediately discovering a strange, profound sense of deep, intense peace that sprang directly from the total, absolute surrender to the intense, demanding conditions. As the demanding hours passed, the unified collective rhythm of all the intensely focused workers, their heavy tools ringing constantly in perfect, profound synchronization, instantly solidified into one unified, harmonious sound, binding their previously fractured spirits into a powerful, singular, cohesive unit of necessary purpose. Kaito realized that the powerful, selfless concentration of his own intense dhyana amplified the intense energy of the entire unified group, transforming the brutal, isolated labor into a highly coordinated, collective expression of profound, unified mindfulness, where the individual, intense need vanished completely into the immense, shared, necessary task. By the profound, cooling twilight, when the heavy tools were finally and reluctantly laid completely down for the night, Kaito's intense body was profoundly exhausted and severely aching, yet his intensely focused mind remained strangely refreshed, completely clear, and profoundly still, having achieved a profound, powerful state of pure samadhi, intense focused absorption, entirely through the powerful, constant exertion of demanding physical energy. The immense continuous effort required to complete the necessary task had not drained his spirit, but had, counterintuitively, deeply nourished it, confirming that genuine active meditation is found not by seeking profound escape from the world, but by achieving absolute total integration within it. Silence in the chaos. The demanding next phase of the immense project brought with it a sudden, significant increase in external, pervasive noise and confusing, jarring activity. As the immense rough trench deepened and widened, the intensely demanding work required the heavy, continuous use of crude, handmade stone hammers, loud, insistent iron chisels, and the coordinated, loud shouting of many intensely focused men, working in close, confined proximity to safely coordinate the constant heavy removal of massive, unforgiving boulders. This sudden, immense auditory chaos presented a powerful, new, and intensely formidable challenge to Kaito's previously discovered, fragile internal serenity, directly confronting his growing practice of sustained dhyana with the sheer, demanding reality of intense external distraction. Kaito initially struggled severely, finding his previously unwavering focus continuously shattered and scattered by the constant, aggressive demands of the highly disruptive external environment. The unexpected, sharp clang of metal against stone would instantly pull his entire attention violently outwards, and the persistent, loud arguments between the intensely tired villagers over the precise, necessary distribution of heavy tools would inevitably fuel a powerful, immediate surge of internal irritation and paralyzing judgment. He realized immediately that maintaining internal necessary peace in the quiet solitude of the temple was only the initial, crucial test. The true, profound mastery lay in maintaining that same deep, powerful serenity while completely submerged in the intense, disruptive currents of the world's immediate, demanding suffering. He intensely remembered Mestre Hoshi's profound, simple teaching, comparing the intensely focused mind to a deep, calm, still lake. The relentless surface might be aggressively whipped into a violently turbulent foam by the sudden external winds of disruptive chaos, but the necessary profound depths of the large body of water remain eternally calm, entirely untouched by the intense, superficial agitation above. Kaito's immediate necessary task was therefore not to fruitlessly attempt to forcefully stop the aggressive external noise an impossible and ultimately futile effort, but simply to continuously withdraw his intense reactive energy from the immediate churning surface and anchor it deeply within the profound, still, unchanging core. To specifically counter the relentless, pervasive auditory assault, Kaito consciously chose a particular, persistent noise, the dull, rhythmic, continuous grinding of a small stone mill being tirelessly operated by an extremely strong village woman to prepare the essential, daily rations of cornflour, and intentionally used it as his sole, focused object of pure concentration. He quickly allowed the countless other loud, jarring sounds to simply enter his hearing without intensely grasping onto them or allowing them to forcefully trigger any internal, emotional judgment, letting them instantly pass like fleeting, unimportant clouds across the vast, expansive sky of his intensely focused awareness. He deliberately recalled the Buddha's profound, powerful words that precisely addressed the intensely internal nature of true, lasting peace. Peace comes from within. Do not actively seek it without. Kaito understood immediately that the external, jarring noises and the internal, reactive irritation were two distinctly separate phenomena, and that his profound suffering arose solely from his own personal, intense insistence that the intense, surrounding world should radically conform to his personal, preconceived notions of peaceful, perfect quiet. This profound realization liberated Kaito's intensely focused mind, instantly allowing him to view the aggressive, loud noise not as a permanent hostile invader, but simply as a temporary, intense expression of the intense, pervasive energy of the immediate necessary construction effort. He began actively practicing metta, profound loving kindness, toward the aggressively shouting villagers, understanding deeply that their loud, abrasive voices were merely the raw, necessary overflow of their profound, pervasive stress and intense anxiety concerning the long, arduous hours and the immense, overwhelming difficulty of the demanding, persistent task at hand. He consciously focused his entire attention on the deliberate, necessary intention behind the constant, aggressive noise, the sheer, persistent desire to urgently bring fresh, life-giving water to their entire, suffering community, finding a profound, resonant harmony in the shared, intense purpose, even amidst the aggressive cacophony of disorganized sound. By focusing entirely on this pure, powerful intention, the surrounding, jarring chaos instantly lost its significant power to disturb his personal, internal equilibrium, transforming the construction site into a powerful, living, dynamic temple of intense, practical concentration. Suddenly, a loud, piercing scream instantly ripped through the immense, persistent din. A large, heavy load of loose, sharp rocks, poorly secured by a tired, unskilled worker, immediately slipped and severely injured the foot of an older man working precariously below, instantly plunging the site into a sudden, chaotic flurry of aggressive shouting, immense panic, and immediate, profound confusion. The intense, immediate crisis served as the most severe, ultimate test of Kaito's new, fragile serenity, demanding an immediate, calm response amidst the intense, immediate danger. Kaito intentionally did not react with immediate, overwhelming panic or aggressive judgmental anger, nor did he allow his intense emotional fear to instantly hijack his necessary, clear thoughts. He calmly and decisively stepped immediately into the intense center of the dangerous chaos, issuing immediate, concise instructions for necessary medical aid and the highly necessary stabilization of the immense rock pile, his profoundly calm, non-reactive voice instantly cutting through the intense hysteria, acting as a powerful, necessary anchor that immediately stabilized the rapidly deteriorating, volatile situation. After the intense injured man was successfully and safely carried away, and the intense work grudgingly resumed its slower, more cautious rhythm, Kaito returned to his essential work, recognizing deeply that the profound, immediate utility of dhyana was not merely achieving a personal, blissful silence, but rather achieving the critical, absolute silence needed for correct action in the exact, demanding moment when decisive, clear-headedness was the most urgently required commodity. He had successfully discovered the profound, unshakable core of deep, internal stillness that continuously endures and quietly functions precisely in the intense, necessary heart of the external, unavoidable storm, the lake of the mind. The intense, burning heat, a relentless, pervasive force that had defined the past few months of severe, grinding labor, finally and dramatically broke with a sudden, violent display of immense meteorological power, as the heavy, ominous sky rapidly transformed into a deep, bruised purple, and the air crackled loudly with the sharp, aggressive scent of imminent, torrential rain, bringing with it a powerful, immediate surge of profound hope, immediately followed by a chilling, paralyzing wave of intense, justifiable fear. Kaito and the intensely focused workers immediately dropped their heavy tools, gazing upwards at the churning, volatile heavens. Their intensely strained faces, a complex, chaotic mixture of intense, weary relief that the suffocating drought might finally be broken, and deep, profound anxiety about the immense, immediate destructive potential of the rapidly approaching, immense storm. The massive, sudden deluge began without any gentle warning, not with a simple, quiet sprinkle, but with a relentless, overwhelming sheet of intensely cold, aggressively driven water that instantly turned the fine, dry dust of the mountain path into a thick, treacherous, rapidly flowing slurry of mud and small sharp stones within a mere few short moments. The sheer, relentless force of the sudden, intense rainfall immediately threatened to violently undo weeks of exhausting, precise, meticulous effort, as the high banks of the newly carved channel, still lacking the necessary protective layer of settled, cohesive soil and natural vegetation, began to instantly crumble and violently erode under the immense, immediate pressure of the aggressive, fast-moving current. The precise, hard-won flow control that Kaito had patiently established through relentless, careful calibration was instantaneously and violently lost, replaced entirely by a destructive, rushing torrent that aggressively tore away protective shoring and forcefully swept away any loose equipment that had been foolishly left too close to the rapidly expanding edge. Panic, a potent and highly infectious emotion, immediately flared up fiercely among the deeply tired, intensely focused villagers, who began aggressively shouting conflicting instructions and frantically attempting to move massive, immovable boulders with desperate, uncoordinated energy, adding immense, immediate human confusion to the immense raw power of the relentless natural disaster. In the intense, overwhelming chaos, Kaito felt a powerful, familiar surge of intense, primal fear and paralyzing, sharp frustration rising rapidly within his intensely focused chest. The instinctive, emotional urge to aggressively scream at the destructive, overwhelming sky, or to desperately attempt to physically wrestle control back from the enormous, unforgiving power of nature's relentless display. This severe, immediate threat of total failure served as the most severe, ultimate test of his recently acquired, profound internal stillness, actively challenging the profound, deep calm he had meticulously cultivated during the monotonous, peaceful rhythm of his previous deep meditation practice. He suddenly stood completely still, intentionally planting his straining feet firmly and deeply into the thick, rapidly forming mud, and forced his fiercely pounding heart and intensely racing thoughts to immediately return to the essential, fundamental principle of the powerful, profound lake of the mind, visualizing his intensely focused consciousness as a massive, deep body of water. The surface, violently disturbed by the aggressive, driving rain, was turbulent, churning, and totally chaotic, yet the essential, profound depth remained completely still, perfectly cool, and entirely untouched by the relentless external disturbance above. Kaito silently affirmed a vital, profound truth that Mestre Hoshi had continuously drilled into him over many patient years. When the mind is intensely focused, the body naturally follows with immediate, necessary action. But when the mind is violently scattered, the body instantly freezes in profound, paralyzing indecision. He recalled the essential, universal teaching: there is no path to true happiness. Happiness is the true path. Kaito understood profoundly that dwelling on the past mistake of not fully reinforcing the banks or intensely worrying about the future collapse only served to completely prevent the necessary, decisive action required in the absolute, immediate present moment. By intentionally shedding the intensely debilitating expectation that the precise situation should always be predictable, simple, or highly controlled, Kaito found the profound, necessary clarity to calmly and decisively assess the immense, immediate damage with detached, clear precision. He calmly and methodically directed small, focused groups to immediately dig necessary temporary diversion trenches above the major pressure points, effectively mitigating the worst of the destructive erosion and successfully preventing a total, catastrophic washout of the entire immense project. He intensely watched as a particular section of bank, where weeks of exhausting labor had been invested, rapidly collapsed into the aggressive, raging water, dissolving completely in the violent, overwhelming current. Instead of instantly succumbing to deep, paralyzing despair over the immense, perceived loss of effort and valuable time, Kaito immediately focused only on the sheer, essential power and the overwhelming, necessary abundance of the life-giving water that was now flooding the previously parched earth, instantly realizing that the intense, necessary destruction was simply the demanding, temporary precursor to profound, long-term, necessary healing and rebirth. Kaito suddenly recognized deeply that true, lasting dhyana, pure focused concentration, was not merely the intentional ability to achieve and maintain perfect, profound stillness in a comfortable, quiet room, but the active, critical ability to decisively access that essential, profound stillness precisely during the intense, violent center of a powerful, demanding storm, utilizing that essential clarity to actively serve the greater, immediate good. It was the absolute, total surrender of the demanding ego's intense need for absolute static control, fully accepting the fierce, immutable reality of continuous, necessary change. As the destructive, overwhelming storm finally passed, leaving behind a world thoroughly washed clean and glistening brightly under a brilliant, fierce afternoon sun, Kaito's intense body was entirely soaked through, shivering slightly, and intensely covered in thick, clinging mud. Yet his profoundly focused mind remained exceptionally clear, totally calm, and highly energized. The aggressive external turbulence had completely failed to penetrate his profoundly established internal core, confirming that the hard-won peace found within the intense, constant effort was immensely more durable than any temporary peace found only in quiet, deliberate seclusion, the vision of interdependence. The momentous, crucial day finally arrived when the deep main current of the meticulously repaired, newly reinforced channel, now flowing calmly and consistently after the intense, aggressive storm, finally reached and peacefully breached the high earthen wall of the primary village reservoir, causing an immediate, sharp intake of collective, relieved breath from the large, anxiously waiting crowd of intensely focused villagers. The essential, dark, cool water slowly pooled into the huge empty basin with a quiet, persistent, rhythmic gurgle that sounded vastly louder and far more melodious than any triumphant, deafening fanfare could ever achieve, instantly transforming the previously arid landscape into a powerful, living symbol of immense, tangible hope and sustained, necessary relief. Kaito intensely observed the raw, emotional outpouring of immense, profound joy on the many grateful faces. The quiet tears of immense relief shed by the older, intensely weathered farmers. The loud, infectious laughter of the many young, delighted children splashing recklessly in the overflowing, life-giving spillways, and the quiet, deep embrace of the village elders, their intense anxiety finally and completely lifted. Yet, in this moment of profound, shared, palpable success, Kaito experienced no powerful, self-congratulatory pride, no intense sense of personal achievement or demanding self-referential triumph, only a deep, quiet, profound sense of being a powerful, essential vessel through which the necessary, fundamental service had peacefully flowed. He immediately understood that the essential, visible water flowing robustly before them was not merely the result of his own immense, dedicated labor, virya, nor was it the sole outcome of the immediate, critical aid provided by the temple's intense generosity, dana, but the profound, necessary, inevitable culmination of every single, necessary paramita working in seamless, unified harmony. The essential honesty, sila, required in distributing the dwindling precious resources, the necessary, immense patience, kshanti, demanded by the slow, natural growth cycle, and the deep, unwavering attention, dhyana, required to navigate the profound, unpredictable chaos of the intense, aggressive storm. Sitting quietly on a massive, sun-warmed stone overlooking the rapidly filling reservoir, Kaito spoke softly to an intensely focused elderly farmer named Jiro, who was patiently cleaning his old necessary spade. Jiro smiled gently, observing the swirling cool water, and remarked, "The mountain always gives, but only when we are profoundly ready to humbly receive, and only after we have actively made the necessary difficult space." Kaito instantly realized that the great, profound wisdom, prajna, was entirely contained within Jiro's simple, humble words, a profound realization that the self and the challenging environment are entirely inseparable. The deep intellectual understanding of prajna that Kaito had initially intensely sought in the dry, complex pages of ancient, revered sutras now manifested fully and vividly as a direct, irrefutable perception of total, fundamental interdependence. The profound relief of the entire village was entirely dependent on the specific physical action of Kaito's intensely strained body, and his personal spiritual awakening was entirely dependent on the persistent, demanding suffering and the immense, necessary need of the distant valley below the mountain. Kaito recalled the profound, fundamental Buddhist teaching of mutual existence, often simply called dependent origination. Everything relies entirely on everything else. He realized that this was the highest, ultimate form of profound wisdom. Not merely knowing that all things are constantly interconnected, but completely experiencing that undeniable, critical truth so immediately and profoundly that the very notion of a separate, isolated, self-contained self completely dissolves. He silently recited the famous ancient saying, "Holding on to anger is like intensely grasping a hot, burning coal, with the strong intention of throwing it aggressively at someone else. You are the only one who gets severely burned." True wisdom, Kaito now knew, completely extinguished the coal before it could even be consciously picked up. He intensely observed a small, delicate spider meticulously weaving its silvery, intricate web between the tall, thorny stems of two struggling, drought-resistant shrubs, seeing the perfect, profound expression of interconnection in the powerful, fragile tension of the shimmering threads. Kaito understood profoundly that his ethical conduct, sila, had been merely the necessary, physical weaving of an external, social web of essential trust and necessary order, a prerequisite step to the total unified vision of prajna that now completely illuminated his intensely focused mind. Kaito realized that the paramitas were never intended to be abstract, separate steps on a linear, demanding path, but essential, integrated qualities of one complete, unified, selfless action. True, enduring generosity requires the profound wisdom to correctly know what is truly needed and the immense patience to correctly deliver it at the absolute, perfect time, all powered by sustained, relentless energy, and all performed with a mind intensely focused by active meditation. His previous persistent frustration with his intensely prolonged training immediately evaporated, completely replaced by a profound, deep gratitude for the entire rigorous process. He no longer intensely yearned for a sudden, dramatic flash of intense, ethereal light, or a powerful, profound, definitive moment of final, abstract illumination. He had now found the subtle, profound luminosity deeply embedded within the necessary, essential rhythm of the hard, physical work and the constant active service, realizing that the temple's essential function was not to aggressively escape the mundane world, but to profoundly and actively perfect necessary action within it. As the sun began its slow, majestic descent over the massive, now fertile valley, casting long, peaceful shadows over the intensely grateful village, Kaito finally and quietly prepared to begin his journey back up the steep, familiar mountain path, leaving behind the massive, full reservoir and the profound, peaceful satisfaction of a necessary, complete job. He carried no heavy, personal burden of intense pride, only the deep, powerful, quiet understanding that the profound, ultimate goal of his rigorous monastic practice was entirely and inextricably bound to the necessary physical well-being of the world he had mistakenly tried so aggressively to entirely transcend. The seamless circle. The arduous, familiar climb back up the steep, winding mountain path felt profoundly different to Kaito, not as a severe physical test to be endured and aggressively overcome, but simply as a gentle, natural movement of his intensely focused body through the ancient, familiar landscape, a smooth, necessary culmination of his entire, transformative journey in the difficult, demanding valley below the temple. His intensely tired muscles ached deeply, singing a quiet, profound song of sustained, effective labor. Yet his profoundly focused mind remained exceptionally clear and completely unburdened, no longer desperately chasing fleeting concepts, or anxiously anticipating the next grand lesson, finding immense satisfaction purely in the deep, powerful rhythm of his own careful, precise breath and the gentle, persistent placement of his feet on the worn, dusty earth. He consciously noticed the intricate, subtle patterns of the sun's intense light filtering softly through the high, dense canopy, and the cool, earthy scent of the deep, damp moss clinging stubbornly to the large grey granite boulders. 1,000 small, previously unnoticed details that now sang powerfully of the profound, persistent presence of the present, immediate moment. He finally reached the high-arched stone gate of the Templo da Serenidade Eterna, just as the immense dying sun dipped dramatically below the jagged western ridge, bathing the ancient weathered courtyard in a rich, warm golden light that seemed to hold both immense welcome and deep, quiet reverence. Mestre Hoshi was peacefully sweeping the clean, smooth stone steps with his old, familiar bamboo broom, moving with the same precise, timeless, tranquil pace that Kaito had observed countless times before. Yet this evening, the Mestre's simple, humble action possessed a new, powerful, crystalline clarity, a profound realization that this intense, deliberate, constant sweeping was not merely a mundane, necessary chore, but the active, perfect embodiment of generosity, patience, and profound, unwavering attention all rolled into one singular, unified motion. Kaito silently bowed deeply, dropping his massive, empty leather water sack to the side, and then calmly stood waiting, intensely focusing on the gentle, soft rustle of the broom's persistent straw against the ancient, hard stone, patiently allowing the Mestre to completely finish his current, precise path. Mestre Hoshi finally ceased his work, setting the broom carefully and deliberately against the smooth grey wall, and then calmly turned his intensely focused gaze towards Kaito, his deeply wrinkled face completely revealing no surprise, no immediate questions, and no immediate judgment, only a deep, immense, quiet understanding that completely surpassed the immediate need for any verbal report of the canal's successful completion, or the immediate physical relief of the distant, struggling village. The young monk then recounted his arduous 3-month journey, not focusing intensely on the immense physical hardship or the ultimate success of the monumental engineering project, but intensely describing his profound internal struggle, his previous deep contempt for the mundane, intense difficulty of the constant water distribution, his paralyzing, intense frustration with the aggressive, relentless storm, and his desperate, initial intellectual struggle to reconcile the elevated, high, spiritual concepts he had diligently studied with the harsh, demanding reality of the muddy, practical world. He admitted honestly that he had initially sought illumination only in the rarefied, quiet air of the secluded meditation hall, aggressively rejecting the profound illumination that was constantly present in the intense, chaotic valley floor. Mestre Hoshi then gently prompted Kaito, his voice a quiet, calming murmur like the distant, slow turning of a massive, ancient millstone, asking softly, "And the Paramitas, those specific, essential perfections, did you ultimately find them resting peacefully between the high, elevated lines of the revered sutras, or hidden deeply beneath the heavy, cold, unforgiving weight of the sharp black stone you had to constantly move during the intense, persistent excavation?" the Mestre then offered. Kaito, a deeply carved, smooth wooden cup of warm, refreshing herbal tea, the steam instantly rising gently in the cool, crisp mountain air, a silent, profound gesture that immediately brought immediate physical and spiritual comfort to the deeply weary, intensely focused traveler. Kaito carefully accepted the deeply offered cup, feeling the intense, soothing warmth penetrate his cold, aching palms, and then calmly responded with the immense clarity of someone who has finally seen beyond the confining boundary of demanding duality, saying, "Venerable Mestre, I had previously seen generosity, patience, and sustained energy as distinct, separate steps to be mastered and completed in precise, sequential order. But the intense, chaotic valley revealed them to be simply the multiple, necessary facets of a singular, perfect, selfless jewel, entirely interdependent and completely inseparable in action." He realized that true dana, the pure act of giving, was impossible without the deep, clear insight of prajna to correctly guide it, and the fierce, constant virya to sustain it consistently. He then reflected on his earlier, deep fear of losing the precious, scarce water, a strong fear that had intensely threatened to paralyze his initial generous intent. He spoke with quiet, confident authority. "I finally understood the profound ultimate teaching that the revered Buddha offered us. The root of suffering is attachment. I realized that my most severe attachment was not merely to the water itself, but to the demanding idea of myself as the effective, self-sufficient giver. And only when I completely surrendered that intense, full self did the water truly flow freely and robustly, completely unbound by my own intense, petty expectations of deserving recognition or immediate thanks." Mestre Hoshi listened patiently to the young monk's detailed, profound report, his intense, quiet gaze fixed entirely on the high, darkening horizon. And when Kaito finally fell silent, the old Mestre simply nodded deeply once, slowly, a profound gesture that instantly confirmed the absolute internal completion of the rigorous, necessary lesson. He then gently placed his large, warm hand upon Kaito's intensely slumped shoulder, offering the lightest of necessary pressures, and said calmly, "The water channel is now completed, Kaito, and the reservoir is now immensely full. The only remaining crucial task is to ensure that the vital, necessary flow of generosity and profound wisdom within your own inner channel never again becomes severely obstructed or violently blocked." Kaito deeply bowed again, a silent, genuine gesture now performed not out of demanded duty, but out of immense, powerful, heartfelt reverence for the profound, demanding circumstances that had served as his greatest teacher. A reverence that extended powerfully to the old Mestre, the immensely suffering villagers, the aggressive demanding drought, and the fierce relentless storm. He understood profoundly that the true essential work of a monk was not to aggressively climb towards a mythical, distant heaven of abstract thought, but to constantly kneel deeply in the mundane, difficult, necessary mud of the immediate world, actively cultivating essential peace through intense, sustained, selfless action. That intense, crucial evening, Kaito sat quietly in the deep, silent meditation hall, not desperately attempting to achieve an elevated, ethereal state of pure intellectual enlightenment, but simply allowing the immense, profound peace of the completed, selfless work to completely settle within his intensely focused being. The hard, heavy labor had physically exhausted him entirely, but the genuine, profound realization of true, fundamental interdependence had spiritually renewed his entire existence. He knew, with an absolute, unshakable certainty, that the journey for him was not over, but that the frantic, demanding searching had finally and definitively stopped. The lotus in the desert. Weeks peacefully turned into quiet, serene months, and the profound, relentless memory of the severe, punishing drought began slowly to recede like the morning mist completely dissolving under the intense, powerful summer sun, leaving behind a distant valley that was intensely greening again, robustly nourished by the steady, persistent flow of the constant, cool, clean water. Kaito now performed his daily, routine duties within the temple grounds, meticulously sweeping the worn paths, patiently tending the large, communal garden, and diligently polishing the cold, smooth stones of the high altar, not as a demanding, tiresome means to an elevated, superior end, but simply as an essential, complete end in itself, finding pure, profound, meditative joy in the inherent, detailed perfection of each necessary, immediate task. The distinction between the high, elevated spiritual practice and the mundane, essential daily action had completely dissolved for Kaito, replaced entirely by a profound, continuous state of total, unwavering awareness. His generosity, dana, manifested simply as ensuring that the communal fire was always diligently stocked for the early morning preparation of food. His patience, kshanti, as his deep, calm stillness when another, younger novice broke an expensive, important ceremonial bowl, and his deep, profound wisdom, prajna, as the absolute, quiet acceptance of what the immediate moment demanded of his focused attention and energy. Kaito had deeply learned that the essential paramitas were never demanding, rigid laws aggressively imposed from a powerful, external authority, but the essential, organic, necessary expressions of a fully cultivated, compassionate, highly awakened heart. Just as a perfectly formed, beautiful lotus naturally emerges completely untainted from the dark, thick, surrounding mud, so too did his pure, essential actions now arise naturally and spontaneously from a profound, deep place of total inner clarity and absolute, intense commitment to the immediate, demanding well-being of all sentient beings around him. The frantic, aggressive pursuit of a future, abstract illumination, had been entirely replaced by the quiet, deep recognition of the complete, perfect illumination that was constantly present in the immediate, demanding here and now. The true, necessary peace he had so desperately sought on the high, isolated mountain was ultimately and ironically found only by descending fully into the intense, necessary suffering and relentless labor of the distant, struggling valley, discovering that the path to spiritual awakening was entirely inseparable from the constant, demanding practice of genuine, active compassion and relentless, necessary service. Kaito now knew the profound, fundamental truth of the ancient Buddhist teaching, feeling it resonate deeply within his entire being, recognizing that the greatest, most profound battle was never fought with aggressive, external forces or demanding, challenging circumstances, but always and fiercely within the intensely demanding landscape of his own reactive, demanding mind. He had finally mastered the ultimate, essential art of being fully and completely present, realizing that true spiritual mastery was simply the ability to respond instantly, accurately, and kindly, regardless of the immense, demanding external pressure or severe challenge. The serene, quiet environment of the Mestre Hoshi's Templo da Serenidade Eterna had entirely prepared Kaito for the relentless chaos of the immediate physical world, demonstrating that the profound inner sanctuary was entirely transportable, capable of enduring immense flood, extreme heat, and immense demanding human criticism with complete, unwavering stillness. He now lived the quiet, profound realization that his intense, disciplined training was only the necessary foundational tool for genuine, profound engagement with the immense real needs of the entire world, not a demanding, selfish escape from its inevitable, challenging difficulties. Let the final peaceful words of the revered Buddha echo gently within your focused, quiet mind tonight. Peace comes from within. Do not seek it without. Kaito finally found that profound, lasting peace, not in the forceful, aggressive rejection of the world's immense pain, but in the compassionate, loving embrace of the necessary action required to alleviate it, transforming frustration and fatigue into sustained, joyful, selfless service. As you peacefully prepare to completely dissolve your demanding consciousness into the deep, quiet waters of necessary, restorative sleep, take a careful, precise moment to entirely recognize the essential paramitas within your own day's actions, the small, unnoticed acts of generosity, the moments of deep, unwavering patience you patiently offered to challenging individuals, and the constant, sustained energy you utilized to actively pursue the good in your own unique, demanding path. These small, seemingly insignificant acts are the solid, necessary foundation of your own unique, profound inner temple. Allow the constant, soft sound of Kaito's persistent, rhythmic breathing and the immense, comforting image of the now flowing, life-giving water to completely guide your demanding thoughts away from the persistent, nagging anxieties and completely towards a deep, profound sense of deep, comprehensive well-being and immense, complete rest. Let the powerful truth of interdependence actively remind you that your peace is entirely connected to the peace of the world, and that the profound, important work of the spirit continues, even as your physical body peacefully rests. May your spirit find the powerful, profound stillness of the perfectly clear lake, even as the forceful external winds of life fiercely churn its surface. Find deep, restorative rest and absolute, profound peace,